Breaking news on Friday night, Notre Dame has its new defensive coordinator, Marcus Freeman from Cincinnati, and the man who broke the news was Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports, and you can follow him on Twitter at Pete Thamel, Thamel. Pete, just tell us how this came together.
So I really think when you really look at this, Mike, this is a pretty significant hire for Notre Dame. There have not been many instances in the recent past, and maybe even longer, where Notre Dame has been able to go up against an SEC power for a talented coach and win. What we're going to assume is a pretty heavy financial battle. Now, I don't want to say Notre Dame outbid for Marcus Freeman because that's not correct, and we'll never know because FOIA laws don't apply to private institutions like Notre Dame. But what we do know is that LSU was aggressive in wanting Marcus Freeman, and Notre Dame was able to put on its big boy pants and hang with an SEC power and one of the wealthiest athletic departments in the country. And that is not something that Notre Dame over the past 2 decades can really claim in terms of really going out and spending for top talent. And usually when you spend for top talent in coaching, you get a return on that. And I should actually specify that with assistant coach talent. Brian Kelly is obviously well compensated, but to keep these programs going like they have, these assistant coach salaries and coordinator salaries are quite exorbitant. And for the athletic department at Notre Dame, which makes plenty of money, to step up and get the hottest defensive coordinator on the board, a young guy with Midwest ties, a prolific recruiter, a great strategist. I think it's a really significant moment for Notre Dame and for Brian Kelly.
Now, reports seems like Friday morning were suggesting that, he was leaning towards LSU. So did this take you as a surprise or, did you feel like Notre Dame was really the leader all week?
Well, I think it was. I think it was a difficult decision for Marcus Freeman because look at LSU. They're going to have more raw talent and access to raw talent on a year in and year out basis, and there is a seductive quality to the SEC. You're playing at what is everyone recognizes as the highest level of college football. So, and look, Marcus took a trip to South Bend, saw Notre Dame, took a trip to LSU, saw LSU. It's an impressive place, right? Tiger Stadium, football facilities there are top notch. Ed Orgeron, certainly, one of the great characters in the in the game, and I think it came down for Marcus Freeman to a comfortable geographic footprint, recruiting an area that he's familiar with and done so prolifically. Being the Midwest, he was obviously at Purdue before he was at Cincinnati. He's a former Ohio State linebacker, and what is the best forum to launch his head coaching career? Marcus Freeman was a serious candidate at Illinois. They went and saw him, interviewed him in person, and he's viewed as the coach who was a runner-up to Brett Bielema. Who look, Brett Bielema coached in I think 3 Rose Bowls and was head coach in the SEC for a long time. Marcus Freeman is 33 or 34, so he certainly made an impression and is clearly on the fast track to become a head coach of his own. So he had to make a decision, Mike. Where will be the best forum for me to go learn program building, kind of get his PhD in college football? And one would have to assume he's hoping after knocking on the door at Illinois to jump to a Power 5 job like Clark Lea just did. So obviously he came down and chose Notre Dame.
Now, Pete, you're obviously very tied in, excellent sources, breaking news all the time for Yahoo Sports, again, including this hire for Notre Dame. You broke this one before Notre Dame even announced it. What do your contacts say about Marcus Freeman? Obviously, he was such a hot commodity, during this, brief off season there for Cincinnati and Notre Dame. But just how well regarded is he when you talk to people in college football?
He's remarkably well regarded, Mike. If Luke Fickell had left Cincinnati this season to become a head coach, and obviously if Michigan had opened, he would have been a speculative favorite there. And Luke Fickell certainly got calls. I think he's won 11 games, and then went undefeated this regular season. So he's on a remarkable run there at Cincinnati. He is the next guy from that group of five to jump up. It was really regarded that Marcus Freeman would have an excellent chance to be the next coach at Cincinnati to replace him. It wasn't done. He wasn't the coach in waiting, but the feeling amongst the athletic department there was such an overwhelming respect for Marcus Freeman that transition, I would have considered it likely. Now, obviously, these things are complicated. Coaching searches can be complicated, but there was just really a high level of regard for Marcus Freeman there. He had an opportunity to go to Michigan State's defensive coordinator last year for Mel Tucker. They made a very lucrative offer for him. He turned it down to stay with Luke Fickell, who was his position coach when he played at Ohio State. The Fickles and the Freemans are very close. Each have 6 kids, I believe, and the families are very tight. Marcus Freeman was actually living in Luke Fickell's basement for a time during all this because he was either moving or his house was getting finished. Luke was telling me that the other day. So he was very loyal to Luke Fickell for a long time. The Tennessee Titans called. He had a chance to go join Mike Vrabel, another Ohio State guy last year. Didn't do that. There was a lot of opportunity, and there has been a lot of opportunity for Marcus Freeman to go. So I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Notre Dame just hired one of the country's hottest assistant coaches.
And, you look at their past, defensive coordinators too. Mike Elko, was only at Notre Dame for a year and then, left the Irish to take a big, pay increase to go to Texas A&M. Clark Lea was hired to replace him. Clark Lea is now Vanderbilt's head coach. You got to think, Pete, Marcus Freeman might not be at Notre Dame for more than a year or two because he's on a fast track to be a very good head coach. So, I mean, what can you say about Notre Dame's, just especially in these defensive coordinators, just such a strong trio that they've had these past few years?
Yeah, after things bottomed out with Van Gorder, you really have to give credit to the program, athletic director Jack Swarbrick, all the people in Brian Kelly's front office, kind of in the Goog over there, for identifying and in Clark's case developing. Clark obviously came with Mike Elko, and he had really never called defense. I think he had done it, once or twice, past in his career, but he'd never had a full season as a collegiate defensive coordinator. So that was a bold move to move Clark up. It obviously paid off in spades. Their record with Clark Lea as defensive coordinator was outstanding, and so I think one of the things that the Elko hire taught them, because if you remember, Wake Forest had a top 10 defense the year that Notre Dame went and got him, and he was a coveted guy in that cycle. I think it taught him a little bit of a lesson. Look, if we're gonna come import the best, we're gonna have to identify it fit, and then we're gonna have to pay for it. And I think Elko leaving for A&M was a little bit of a wake up call, saying, hey, if we want to be in the playoff, we want to compete with these playoff teams, we have to pay like they do. So no, it's been a remarkable run. Clark Lea did a wonderful job there. Mike Elko, I think, really did a good job turning that defense around. Maybe when it was a little lighter on talent than we've seen in subsequent years, and it'll be a big challenge for Marcus Freeman to pick up where Clark left off, especially with some of the defensive losses that we've seen in the past couple of days.
Yeah, big hire for Notre Dame here, getting the hottest commodity out on the defensive coordinator trail. Pete, we appreciate you joining and talking about him.
Mike, thanks for having me. Really appreciate you.